Hello my friends, it's Ranger Russ from the Meigs Point Nature Center, coming to you from Meigs Point today with our very special program. We're going to be learning about an atlatl from a former president of the World Atlatl Association and an atlatl champion, and that is Gary Nolf. And I'm just going to give it right over to him. We've got a little issue with the wind today, but this should be a great program. So let me spin the camera. You're on.
Hello, I am absolutely delighted to be here. We were a little bit nervous when we saw all this wind, but we've got our vehicles parked in a good position. Most of you, I would guess, do not know what an atlatl is, but I hope that some of you do. We've been doing presentations, and we, meaning Dr. Don Rankin, who recently passed away, unfortunately. We miss him dearly. I know he's here somewhere watching, because he did all of these with me. And so I wanted to start out by talking about the atlatl and what it is and how it originated. First of all, we're going to go back around 300,000 to 900,000 years ago. And at that time, the people that were in that area, we would call them scavengers. They would go and follow the predators around. Say a lion got a gazelle, and they would wait until the lion was full, and they would then either wait till the lion left and scavenge what was left of the gazelle. A little later after that, they started throwing rocks and sticks at the lion, until one day, one of them got lucky and actually killed the lion with the rock and the sticks. So what that meant was it changed their whole outlook from being a scavenger to being a hunter. When they actually figured out that they could put a stone on the end of the stick and throw it as a spear, they even got better. Now, the advent of the atlatl, and to show you what an atlatl is, it is nothing more than a stick, and I have some that are just that are sticks. Here's one that it just has this is where the branch came up like that, and all it does, it fits at the end of the spear, and I'll show you how those are all made in a minute, but it's like this, and it goes like this. And it goes like that. Now, the atlatl being a stick, and it's kind of interesting. When I was a kid, and I knew nothing about any of this, maybe I was around 10 years old, my cousin and kids in the area, we used to throw apples. We go to the apple tree, and the crab apples worked the best, and you just took a branch and you whittled the end sharp, you stuck the apple on, and then you'd swing it like this, and you could throw it a mile. The only problem was you had no accuracy whatsoever. So we learned, just by trial and error, that if you cut down the length, and generally speaking, it's from your armpit to the tip of your fingers is the length that seems to be the optimum length. So we found out that if you choke down on the stick, you could actually hit somebody with it. So we used to have garbage can lids as shields, and we'd chuck them back and forth at each other. Now, I wouldn't advise that at this point, but that's what we did. And we didn't know that we had been using atlatls to throw our apples. Many of you have probably used a tool called the Chuck It. It throws tennis balls, and it's the same thing. It serves two purposes. One, you don't have to touch the slimy tennis ball. But two, you don't have to put any effort into throwing it. And I'm sure you can think of other items, such as a fishing pole. Use it to increase your leverage. A lacrosse stick. A hammer. If you try to hammer a nail without the handle, it doesn't do much, does it? Nope. So, therefore, when they started using the atlatl, it increased their accuracy, and as they were eating more protein and more meat, their brains were getting bigger, and they were getting more civilized. Now, we have found atlatls in every continent except for Africa, but we're sure they use them in Africa. But they're made out of wood, so they don't last very long. They have been found in dry caves in France that are dated back to 30,000 years ago. They're still using them in New Guinea, in South America, parts of Mexico even. They're using them to hunt ducks because the government took their guns away. And so if you want information on the atlatl, you just have to go online and you can find a multitude of different articles about the atlatl. So what I have here in front of me is a vast variety of different atlatls. I do what is called experiential archaeology, and what I do is I'll take something, and because of the fact that I want to find out how it works, I will utilize the original and make a copy of it. I want to show you this one first. Can you see that? Okay. This one is from Papua New Guinea, and this is a one that, this is an original via eBay, and you can see a couple of spears, and you can see this beautiful carving on the stick. This is one that I made so that the original is brittle and I didn't want to break it, so I made this one to try it. Now what makes this a little different is that it doesn't have a spur on the end, it has a socket. So this goes here like this, and the way they're thrown, they're just thrown like this. And you can see the fearsome darts at the tips of the arrows that they used. This is also a real one, and you can see the intricate carvings that they did. And we were talking about this before, and it was probably somewhat of a status symbol. The better carving that you had, the more status you had, because it would take hours and hours to make that particular carving. This is another one from New Guinea, and this one is also a little bit different. Oop, this is one there. I'll show you that in a minute. This one, it goes into the end of it like this. This is a piece of bamboo that is very well carved. This fits into the end of here, and again, it's thrown like this. Now, as we work our way towards North America, these are a couple here from Australia. Australia, they still use these in the bush. These are from different locations. This is from northern. And this I saw on a YouTube video just the other day. They were using ones exactly like this. And they were doing a demonstration for actually the tourists, but they were using an exact one like this. Another one from Australia is this one. This is a real one from Australia. So I made this one to actually use. They would actually be able to use this as a paddle. They would use it to scoop water. They would use it to gather their fruits. They could mix berries and things in this and mix paint for their faces. They even put a stone in the end of it. This is called spinifex. It's from a root of a tree that they mix with charcoal. And then they would put the stone in there so that they could chop up whatever it is they were going to be eating. They would hunt kangaroo. They would hunt any other small animal. And if you watch the movie Crocodile Dundee, there were two of the Aborigines that he met in the bush who spoke perfect English, but they were all dressed up as Aborigines, and each of them was holding an atlatl. And you probably wouldn't have noticed that unless you knew what an atlatl was. So some other places in the world, I had the good opportunity to go to the Smithsonian, and actually it was their their warehouse in Arlington, and anyone can go there. I didn't know that, but you have to make an appointment months ahead of time, and they'll set it up for you. And they have the most amazing. Well, they only have about 10% of their collections that are on display. About 90% of them are in this huge warehouse. So I went to the Connecticut section, and they had artifacts there that date back 10,000 years that were found hundreds of years ago in Connecticut. But they were the most perfect specimens that you ever saw. So as we were walking around, I wanted to see the Atlatl collection, which was enormous. But one of the things that really struck me, which was really, really cool, was this. Now, this piece right here is the Atlatl. They call it a throwing board. This fits in on the spear like that and like that. And when it's thrown like that. Now, this was actually used for whaling. They would be in their kayak, and they would be able to, they would have it in this position, they'd pick it up, and when they see the whale, they would throw it, and they would lob up and down this way. Now, if this hit the whale, this is the ingenious part. This head would go in, and then this would break off like this, and this would go off with the whale. This would float to the surface. They would then pick this up, snap this back like this, take another one out of their pouch, put it in, and they were ready for the next shot. They'd wait for the whale to come up again, and they would shoot it. Now, the other thing they would do, they would tie a long string onto this, and they'd have a seal bladder as a float, and that's what they would chase while they were hunting down the whale. If you go on YouTube, you can actually see they still allow one whale to be taken. This is the Inuit. There were Eskimos, now they're mostly called Inuit, and they're allowed one whale, and mainly a narwhal, which is the one that has the unicorn type coming out of its head. And they have contests up in Greenland with these things. So I thought that was just an incredibly ingenious method, so that this goes off with the whale. Now, they didn't have a lot of wood, so they didn't want to have to make a whole bunch of these. They usually relied on driftwood to make their spears. This happened to have been a rake that I made into this is deer antler here. These are tips of deer antler. This part is, again, a deer antler, and so were these. And this part of it is cow bone. They would have used ivory, probably walrus. I use the, when you get for your dog, it comes stuffed with peanut butter. So I took the peanut butter out, took it on a bandsaw, cut it into slices, and then fashioned them to make it look like it's something a little bit more exotic. Okay. Okay, then we'll start moving towards, now everybody's aware of the bow and arrow. Oh, sorry. The bow and arrow didn't come into this area until around 2,000 years ago. Now think about that. People have been in this area right here at Hammonasset for 10,000 years. There's actually a fluted point that was found here at the park, about 50 years ago, and it is indicative of the fact that there were people here for that long. But 10,000 years ago, they didn't have the bow and arrow. 10,000 years ago, after the Ice Age receded, the tundra started to grow, the seeds were being blown in, and they were being, the large game, like woolly mammoths, mastodons, were following the tundra and the grasses so that they could eat. Now, after the large animals came, that's when the Native Americans at the time, they were hunter-gatherers. So what they would do is they would follow the game, and they were using an atlatl. This is an example of a point that I napped my own points just so that I can see how they did it. This one would have been around 3,000 to 4,000 years old. It's called the Susquehanna Broadpoint. And so they would mount it on to the tip like this. They would get their atlatl. This is an example of one that would probably have been relatively easy to make. But again, you hold it like this and you shoot it like that. Now another thing they would do is, this is one that you can see there's no point, not yet. So they would make the point, haft it onto a foreshaft. They would slide it into the socket, and it was ready to go. Now the advantage to this was, if they missed, hit a rock, this broke off, or this stayed in the animal, this could come out. They'd only need one of these, and they could have a whole pouch full of these. You can see some of these that I have here. So much easier to carry a pouch than have to carry, like with a bow and arrow, you have a quiver, and you would carry 10 or 15 arrows with you, where this they might take just maybe one or two. But the thing about this was, when you were hunting, you had to hunt with this, because of the fact that a deer has such good eyesight, that you didn't want, if you were down here like this and you saw a deer, you had to take it up, take it like this, put this on here like this, get ready, and shoot. By the time you did that, that deer was gone. So what you would do is you had to carry it in this position for a long period of time. So you were ready to shoot. So just think about carrying that all day like that. Well, one thing that they did in North America, not anywhere else, it's kind of interesting, but they would put a stone, and we call it an atlatl weight, on the end. And what that does, it allows a counterweight so that you don't have to hold up this part as much, because it balances it, and it's much easier to keep in this position. And not only is it easier on your arm, but it also makes it steadier. Because if you're shooting this and you're a half an inch off the aim of your target, by the reaches the target, you're about a foot off. So you have to keep it perfectly straight. It's tough in the wind because the wind keeps wanting to blow it, but that's what they did. Now if you look over here, I have examples of different atlatl weights, and this one was found in Westbrook at Pilot's Point. This one was found in Killingworth, only about 5 miles from here. And you can see this has a hole drilled right straight through it. These were lashed on like this. This one was found in Killingworth also. And these actually had holes drilled in them so that they could be lashed back together again when they broke. We find a lot of broken ones, and a lot of them have, this one even has some marks on it that showed that there was notched, that the other half when it broke was put back together. But this one in the middle is a replica of one that was found in Kentucky at the Indian Knoll site, where they found the handle and the weight and the tip all in line. The wood had rotted away, but in numerous cases they were all in situ like that. So they could put, it was pretty good, reasonable that this is the way it was put together. Now,
let me take a chance to say, if anyone has any questions, you can post them anytime, and we'll answer them as we go along here.
And Russ, if you have any questions.
You covered all my questions.
Okay.
I'm really curious how you make all of these things, and you're explaining that, so
okay.
That always fascinates me.
Yeah, you can see this was a project that was actually a scout project years ago. This is just a piece of bamboo that somebody had taken and split off a piece. And you can see what this was. This was just a part of a tree. And they cut it off, wrapped it around, and this works just fine as an atlatl. They don't, now they can get really fancy this. This is one that I made, not too long ago, but it has some exotic woods. It's got an atlatl weight. Now it has this little V in it, and what that's for, there's nothing in the archaeological record that says that they had one of these like this, but it's kind of a modern invention. And what it does is it allows you to have it like this, and you don't have to hold on to the dart. So it's just a flip like that, and that's all you got to do. Now with the one that I use in competition, and I'll just mention that there's a World Atlatl Association. We have members in almost every state in the United States, and we have members in France and Belgium, Germany, and we have a standardized contest that's called the ISAC, the International Accuracy Contest. And we take 5 shots at 15 meters and 5 shots at 20 meters. And the target is around 4 feet in diameter. The 10 ring is around the size of a pie plate, and the last ring is 6 points. So you add up all your points and you come up with the score. You send it into a central location, and they post it on the internet, and you can tell at any time where you stand in the world against everyone else. It's really kind of a fantastic. Then there are local contests. We have the distance contests. We have our woolly mammoth contest, which is in back of me. And so this one I have to hold.
We have a question. The harpoon, did modern harpooners use an atlatl? Modern whalers?
No. But what they did do was use the same. They had a. If you've ever been to New Bedford, you'll see what they were using for a harpoon. The shaft of the spear is almost 2 inches in diameter. It's really, really heavy. And they were standing at the bow of the ship, and they were shooting directly down. And they weren't shooting a distance. Now they did use guns with harpoons at some point, but the ones that were doing it by hand, that's what they did. Now the interesting thing is that they did copy. This is called a toggle head for a harpoon, and what that means is when this goes in and then this falls out, when they pulled tight on this, it would turn like that inside the whale. So it's in the whale, it turns, and it keeps it from coming out. That isn't going to go anywhere. That is not going to come out. So if you go and look at one of the harpoons from New Bedford, you'll see that these are made out of brass or bronze, but they're the same exact thing. They're called toggle heads, and they were modeled after the Greenland toggle heads.
Another question. What is the origin of the name atlatl? What does it mean, and why is it so hard to say?
It's spelled ATL, and it's an Aztec word for a spear thrower. It's called different things all over the world. In Australia, these are called woomera. I have some here that are. I'm trying to show you. So it was just because they had found atlatl's hole in Mexico that they started calling all spear throwers in North America atlatls. But like I said, in different places they're called different things. This one is really interesting. The original one of this, the real one, is in a museum in Italy, and it was brought back by Cortez when he conquered the Aztecs. And it was all gilded in real gold, and this was an Aztec original. Now the thing that makes it really neat is that it shoots two at once. So it's a double barrel Atlatl. So one goes here like this, the other one goes in here like this, and I'll see if I can get this to just like that. And you're now throwing, so if you had an army of 10 Aztecs and they all had one of these, your army just doubled. So now you're throwing 20 spears where you were only throwing 10 before.
Were women ever allowed to hunt under any circumstances back then?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, they've done some studies where this definitely has an impact on your arm if you're throwing an Atlatl since you were able to throw. So if you're 3 years old, I have a granddaughter who's 4, she's 7 now, but she's been throwing spears since she was 4 years old. And it's amazing, she can hit that woolly mammoth now at 20 meters, and she's only 7. So it's not really strength, it's in the technique. Now, so in those tests, they found that most of the males all had much larger muscle and bone mass in their whichever arm that they were shooting. And they also found that there were women that had the same characteristics. So it showed that they definitely, because when you think about it, if you have a tribe of 20 and 10 and 10, if you had 20 people going out hunting, you had a much better chance of hitting something than you would have if it was only 10. So I'd say yes. I said they definitely. And when I do a lot of demonstrations in schools, and which I do quite a bit, I find that the girls actually pick it up quicker than the boys. The girls, 1, they listen. 2, they do what I tell them to do, where the boys are trying to out-muscle the kid next to them, and it really you don't have to. It's all really in the technique. Now this one is kind of interesting because this one is also Inuit. The real one of these is up at Yukon, and it is at the it's called, well, the Barnum Collection. And this, I copied it from, this is almost an exact replica. Nick Bellantoni let me borrow it, and so I made it so that it is exact as I could make it. The thing about it is it's ergonomic. The way that his hand fits in here like this, and the way it was made is so that you could still have your paddle and hold it, and you could paddle your kayak and still have this in your hand. And then when you went to shoot, it has this groove in the middle. And all you have to do is run it up the groove and you're ready to shoot. So it was made, especially designed so that you could be in your kayak and you could see, it's mainly for seals. So you saw the seal, you put your paddle down, this was laying down right next to where it was, and you just run it up like this and shoot at the seal. So I just thought that was just an ingenious way of doing it. So I made I'm not sure where it is. I've made a couple.
Show everybody the table here. There's a lot of Atlatls here.
So I made this one, as you can see. I carved out from my fingers a spot from my hand, and this one I fashioned after this one. Okay, any other questions at this point? Where was I?
No, last question.
Okay, I was talking about the World Atlatl Association. So we had the World Championship right here in Hammonasset about 5 years ago. That's when I was president of the organization. My wife and I were traveling for our 30th wedding anniversary in France, and we actually shot a contest in France. A couple of years ago, the World Atlatl annual meeting was in Washington State, so we went out to Washington. We've been in Michigan, we were in Wisconsin. Next year it's going to be in Illinois, I hope. They canceled almost everything this year. But we go to New York quite a bit. We go to Pennsylvania. We go to New Hampshire, and there's a diverse group. We've also been to the Valley of Fire out in Nevada, and it's really interesting to see the different things. Now, most people make their own, so you'll see, if there's 100 people, there's 100 different atlatls. Now, there are some places you can buy them, and the one that I would recommend is called Thunderbird Atlatl. They're in New York State. It's Bob Berg. He and I have been fishing with them. I fish with an atlatl similar to this, well, a spear similar to this. We were going out fishing one day, and there was a school of bunker, and I had a different kind of a spear, but it had we tied a string onto it, and you use the atlatl to drive it into the water, and if it gets a fish, then you pull it back. And this is a real one. I actually found it in a flea market, so I'm not sure where it came from, but it's made out of bamboo, and this would have been used for fishing. Now, something similar to this would have been used right here at Meigs Point. There is a weir out at the end of Meigs Point, and what they would do, it would route the fish into an area where they would get caught, and then they would use a spear like this to spear them. They also would found weirs in the Hammonasset River where they would make a stone wall first, and then they would use brush, sticks, so that it was just about, at low tide, it would probably stick up about a half a foot. At high tide, the water could go over it. So the fish would swim over it at high tide. Then as the water fell, they get stuck in back of it, and then they would go in with spears like this, and they would spear the fish behind it.
Just going to reintroduce, this is Gary Nolf, former president of the World Atlatl Association. And a couple of questions. One, someone is very impressed by the ingenuity of human beings over the years, and do people still use them hunting?
They still use them in Papua New Guinea. They actually used them when they were headhunters, and they use them in Australia and in Mexico, and around here in the United States there are only 3 states at the moment that allow deer hunting, and that would be Missouri, Arkansas, and I believe it's Wisconsin, but I'm not sure. Pennsylvania has been trying for quite some time, but they haven't gotten it through yet. The biggest, if you go on YouTube, you'll see that there are quite a few primitive people that are using the atlatl for hunting. You can go into a private park, a private preserve that's designed for hunting, and use an atlatl. They use them for wild boar. That is something that they're not native to the Florida area, and they're glad to get rid of them. So yeah, they're still used for hunting, and a lot of people that are hunting, they make their own points just like I did, and believe me, that is sharp, and that would go through. They've done tests on elephant hide. There was an elephant that died at a zoo, and they took and fired atlatl darts. By the way, we call these darts because we try to differentiate them from handheld spears, but I call them spears anyway, but they're actually darts. This one, I went to the Peabody Museum in Harvard, and I took a picture of, this one is from Peru. So this is an Inca. And you'll see that, now this has a guard here. It's nothing more than some place to keep your hand from sliding down. It does the same thing. You'll hold it like this, and you throw like that. And that's kind of what I did when I made, this one is what I use in competition, and you see that I put that little guard there, and that serves the same purpose. It's just to hold it. I found that my hand, it would get slippery in the summer, and to keep my hand from sliding down, I would do that.
Nancy's from Missouri. She never knew they allowed hunting with an atlatl.
Yeah. In fact, there was a girl that got one last year that actually got a deer legally in Missouri. And she was the only one. So there is also, they have found atlatls in dry caves in the Midwest, and one of them actually had finger loops still attached to it. So the way that works is that you put your fingers like this through the loops, and you pinch the spear like this and throw like that. And it just helps you, it keeps your hand on it and allows you to throw.
Was it ever considered for an Olympic sport?
It's been investigated. What has to happen is it has to be a trial. I'm not sure the word for it. It hasn't been yet. It would be a perfect type of a thing for that. Now, a lot of people ask, well, where'd the bow and arrow come from? How did it go from atlatl to bow and arrow? And one of the advantages of a bow and arrow is that as the deciduous trees in the area started to grow, and there was less open ground for you to throw an atlatl, it's very difficult to throw in the woods because it does arc, and you're way up here when you let it go. So if there's a branch up there, you're going to hit it. So it was advantageous when the bow and arrow came out. And the bow and arrow came from, it actually was started in the Arctic, and it came down the west coast about 4,000 years ago. It took almost 2,000 years for it to get from there to here. But when it did, it took off. And that's what everybody thinks of with Native Americans. They think of bows and arrows, horses, teepees. Well, none of that happened here. There were no horses until the Spaniards. Teepees were a Midwestern, and the same thing with the bow and arrow. So this, in the Midwest, when they have found some atlatls in the dry caves, they found one that was the end of it looked like this. And what this did is that the spear had a knock like a bow. So this would fit in the is the arrow from your bow and arrow here? Okay. This would go in the end of it like this, and then it would throw like that. So the idea is that possibly somebody was thinking, well, if I increase that distance, and it's going to put a little more of a use the string to help push it, that it may actually have been the predecessor of the bow and arrow.
Betty says it reminds her of the chucker you were talking about earlier. She sees the resemblance.
Yeah. Now what we're going to do is, Russ is my long distance thrower, so he's going to show you, he's going to choose which atlatl he wants, and then he's going to launch one that way because somebody parked over there. And we want to just show you how far these can go. That one's a pretty good one.
Laying the camera there.
Yeah. Now I'm not sure if you could see how far that went, but he's going to go out and to retrieve it, and I'm going to just turn this. The world record is 860 feet. That's almost 3 football fields. And he's raising his hand out there, and I'm not sure if you can see him, but that went, I'm guessing, close to 100 yards. I think they could see you. Somebody said unbelievable. But I'm guessing that's close to 100 yards. That really took off.
I can throw it farther. I'm
going to just throw a few into our mammoth, and I'm hoping that you can hear the thud, that the force that it takes, that it makes when it goes in.
Hopefully everybody can hear these impacts.
Now what I'm going to talk a little bit about is the materials that I'm using. Those last 4 were actually fishing pole blanks. They're made out of a composite, and what I do is these are turkey feathers that are dyed. I put a golf tee in the end. The other end I put a small foreshaft, and this is a field point. The reason I do this, and the top of it where it gets really narrow is an arrow shaft, is because I can make them all the same. So I have a matched set. The other thing is, the way I test them is I go like this, I put it on a scale, and I pull down like that. Now, no matter how hard I pull, it'll just flex more. But that'll tell me how much pressure I'm pulling down. If it's too much and it doesn't flex, it wants to go through the air like this. It has to flex like this. So, one of the ones that I shot, This one is showing what a large projectile point would look like, and this is a piece of maple. This was growing along the side of my house.
It was used for hunting. We have a question. Was it also used for war?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Especially the Mayans and the Aztecs. When they were hunter-gatherers back 10,000 years ago, there probably wasn't too much warfare because there wasn't much competition. You had plenty of game, and you were small bands, and you probably didn't have the conflict that you had when you had societies. When the Aztecs and the Mayans, they were conquering the group next to them, and they would probably use, well, they definitely did use them for warfare. This one is made out of ash, and this was one from Bob Berg from the Thunderbird Atlatl. Now the length of the dart is important. The one that Russ shot was relatively short, and if you're shooting for long distance, the less mass and the smaller feathers cuts down on the drag and allows it to go farther. However, you don't get any accuracy that way, and this would have been one that you would use for hunting. They would use heavier darts than the ones that I'm using for target practice.
Do you want to explain the flex of a dart? Kind of like the flex of an arrow?
Yeah, if you see these in slow motion, you'd be amazed how much when you load this up, it flexes about that much. Probably about that much. And again, it flexes back and forth to the target. If it's not flexible enough, like I said before, it will go like this. I've actually seen them with some real heavy homemade darts that don't flex at all, that they almost flip over because you're putting pressure in the back and it goes like this. But the feathers help keep it aligned, and they have to be flexible. Now the Aborigines in Australia did not use feathers. Their darts were about 8 feet long. They were about 8 feet long and very flexible. They actually had to hold it up with one hand. Take this one. This is a real long one. So they would have to hold it. They would actually hold it this way, with one hand holding it up, and they'd start it way back here, and then they would fire it this way. But with no fletching, this was very heavy on the front end and super, super flexible. Now I'm going to pull those out, and I think you'll be able to see how hard it is.
Show how deep they go in too.
Now when I go to schools, I don't usually bring my good darts because inevitably, if they stick into the ground and you pull straight up, they break. So I lose quite a few every time I go to do a demonstration. But what I do is every spring I go to Ocean State job lots and I get tomato stakes. And that's what these are. These are nothing more than the the medium size. There's 3 different lengths. This is the medium size, and I take and put, this is a 16-penny nail that I just drive in and then sharpen it. Now, it's got a golf tee in the end, and these are just duct tape feathers. They're just fine. There's 2 of them, and so I have about probably 60, 70 of these made now, and I always also lose a few. But if you're going to make one, the simplest one I showed you was something like this. It's just a stick with a, here's a really good example. And it's not, the atlatl itself isn't the important part, because these all work. The important part is you got to get the dart, you got to make sure that it's flexible. Now, when you get these, they don't come straight. So what I do is I put a heat gun in my vise, or you can just fold it over and heat it up. And you can see it right in this spot right here, the discolorment. It's starting to burn. Well, as soon as it starts to sweat, you can take it and you can move it. And when you move it like that, and then let it sit and let it cool, it'll stay in that position. So you go along, you work at each one of the nodes first, and then you go back into the center until you get it straight. And that's pretty darn straight.
Question, what wood is best to make these with, and
well,
why?
Okay. The easiest one is the bamboo, but of course in this area there wasn't any bamboo. So they would use willow. They would use anything that they could straighten, like that piece of maple. But I would think that something like willow would be the easiest. These are the longer ones that I have. This one was actually the first one I ever bought. This is a 6.5 foot dart, and over the years it's gotten too flexible, and it really does bend much too much. But it's called river cane. It comes from North Carolina, South Carolina, and that's what most of the competition darts are made out of. Now they can be made out of aluminum. The current world champion, he uses aluminum. There are 3 pieces. There are pieces put inside to make it more rigid. A couple years ago, I had made one just from 2 arrows that were aluminum, and when I threw it, it bent. It didn't bend back. It stayed in that position, so that wasn't going to work. But like I said, the easiest ones, you can get bamboo. It doesn't have to be job lots, but you can get it at most, they're tomato sticks. And they're probably the easiest thing to do. I've also made them out of dowels. I've taken 3 1/8-inch dowels. I don't think I have one with me. And I take a piece of, you can get oak dowels, and you can get Luan dowels. Well, the oak is heavier, so you want to use that on the end. And I just take a piece of tubing and put it in, and sometimes it's too flexible, but it does work pretty well for a dart. Or you can go online and you can buy darts sets all made up. You can buy kits. Again, Thunderbird is the one I recommend, but there are other ones on the website also.
We just have a few more minutes. If anybody has any questions for Gary, this would be a great time.
Whenever I go anywhere, a lot of times I'll come back with an idea, and this was one of them. We went to, when we were at the World annual meeting in Washington State, we went up to Alaska, and in one of the museums they had one of these, and this was for spearing salmon. And they did have salmon runs in Connecticut, and what they would do is you could use this with an atlatl too, but most likely it was just jabbed into the school of fish. The fish would go in here, and when they pulled back, it would the fish wouldn't get away. This one happens to be moose ribs, which somebody gave me, and a piece of bamboo. Again, job loss. This is their large piece. You can get bamboo in that area. Any other questions? How much time we got?
Almost none. No more questions.
Okay.
All right, we can do our wrap up. All right. Gary, you just want to throw a few to close us out, and I'm going to let people know about next week. We have former state archaeologist Nick Bellantoni to be talking about the native tribes of the area. And the following week, we will have another Native American, or someone speaking about Native Americans. Actually, I believe that one is a Native American presenting the program as well. So these programs are put on thanks to the Friends of Hammonasset, so we want to give the Friends a shout out. And if you would like to support the Friends of Hammonasset, you can visit their website. They have a way that you can donate on the Friends of Hammonasset website, friendsofhammonasset.org, I believe. Also, you can watch additional Nature Center programs Tuesdays through Fridays at 11 o'clock. That's the Meigs Point Nature Center Facebook live presentations. If you miss a live presentation, you can watch them on YouTube. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Meigs Point Nature Center YouTube channel. And you can visit our website. The Virtual Learning Center has an archive of programs that we've done with additional educational information. There's word searches and vocabulary lists which can be used in the classroom, in your home school education, any way that you would like to use them. If you would like more information, you can contact us on the website, meigspointnaturecenter.org. So until next time, this is Ranger Russ with special guest Gary Nolf signing off. Thank you all for tuning in.